So here for correction, we do not have classes on the week of December 3rd. We're only going to have classes on the 27, November 27 and November 29. This week is a study week, which I was not aware of, but we're not going to have classes here. So next thing is going to be exam number 5 and optional cumulative final on the 13th. Let's go here and finish up the part with the muscles, and then we're going to start with the nervous system, and on those final lectures we cover as much of the nervous system as possible, but I'll make it as simple as possible, just the same way as we're doing with the muscles here. Okay. And of course, I'm not expecting you to memorize every muscle that you probably looked at in the lab, because you already did it over there, right? But you do have to know some basic and most common, I would say, muscles and the muscle groups too. Okay, so I'm sure you have heard about naming your muscles, right? But just to make sure that you understand what you have to know for this session, or for this class, right? So how you name the muscles? You can name it based on location. For example, there is a muscle here that's called fibularis. So you see that it's close to the fibula. So that's convenient, right? You can name the muscle based on shape. So here an example is your deltoid muscle that looks like the Greek word delta, right? You can name it based on size. For example, here you have your maximus, that is the biggest, and then you have minimus, that is the smallest, or you can have longus, that is a long muscle, okay? And you can also name muscles based on direction of the fibers that are composing the muscle, right? So here you have examples of fibers that are straight or rectus, right? So fibers that are rectus, they run straight, for example, here up and down. Okay, so these are the rectus, they form your six-pack in your belly. Okay, you can have transversus. Okay, those are running in at angles, right? And you can have oblique fibers. So transversus is really at right angles, and then oblique fibers is running at different angles that they're defined based on the axis. Okay, we're going to look in more details here. Okay. You can also name the muscles in the number of origins that the muscles have, and a couple of muscles that I hope everybody's very familiar with is the biceps that have 2 origins, and also the triceps that are on the back of the arm, they have 3 origins. So very simple, well-known muscles. And then you have those namings of the muscles that are based on attachments. For example, here you have the sternocleidomastoid muscle. And then you are thinking, oh, sternal is going down this way, and cleidomastoid, you're imagining that it has to do something with this part of the head, right? So you can basically look for the muscle at the places that is named. Oh, 1 second, let me. Okay, so some muscles are also named based on the action that the muscle is producing. So we have here, for example, flexors or extensor muscles. Okay, and sometimes you can combine a lot of these terms, and the names of the muscles get to be quite long. Okay, so here is the first muscle that I'm expecting you to know, right? So this muscle that is connecting here the sternoclavicle part to the mastoid bone right there, and especially what it's doing, right? When you flex that muscle, what's happening with your head. And here comes your first question. When lying on your back, which of the following muscles contract to lift your head? The answer here is A, sternocleidomastoid muscle. We just mentioned that. All right, so here are a few more pictures on the muscle, right? So here you have your deltoid muscle and subscapularis under the scapula muscle, right? Infraspinatus muscle, and I'm not asking you to know that one, okay? So other ways of looking at what muscles are doing is by looking at what are their functions. So some muscles are agonists. That means they work together with the same type of function. So the agonist muscle to a major muscle is going to be enhancing the muscle function. Then you have your antagonists that go for opposite movement than your original muscle is doing. Now, why is it that you have to have antagonists in the first place? No. Yes, exactly. You need to have antagonists because your muscles can only contract. You cannot tell your muscle to not contract. So the way that you get your arm, like once you have the arm up, and the way you get your arm to go down is by contracting the other muscle that is on the other side, or the antagonist to the first movement. Okay, so you can only tell your muscles to contract. You cannot tell them to expand or uncontract. Okay, so antagonist is very, very important for that. And then you have your synergistic muscle that do the same type of or similar type of function as your agonists, but they enhance also the movement of the muscle by stabilization. So types of muscles, right? So when you look at the muscle arrangement based on their fibers or the fascicles, right? So the most common types of muscles you have, or muscle groups you have circular, convergent, parallel, fusiform, and pinnate. How do you say that in English? Pinnate? There you go. All right. So circular, that's very obvious. The muscle is circular. The fibers are arranged in a circular fashion, right? So examples of circular muscles that you have here showing in concentric rings, those are muscles that you can find on your eyes, like around the eyes, also around the mouth, and on those sphincter muscles. Those are circular muscles. And then you have convergent muscles that basically they start with this broad region here and they all converge to a single tendon here. Okay, so example of convergent muscles, you have here your pectoralis major. Okay, so that's an example of a convergent muscle. So here you have a circular, convergent, then you have your parallel muscles. So those are basically telling you the fibers are organized in parallel fashion, right? And then you have your fusiform muscle. Now, when you look at your fusiform and your parallel muscles, you see there's not a lot of difference among them, right? So this fusiform is just like they have a little belly in here in comparison to the parallel that is basically like this straight string of muscle. So they call here fusiform as being spindle-shaped muscles with parallel fibers. Okay. And then you have your pinnate muscle that is named pinnate because it looks like penna, which is a feather, right? So you have several forms of these pinnate muscles. You can have like one feather or several feathers together, right? That looks, it would be named like multi-pinnate muscle. Now, interesting thing about these muscles is that the fibers are shorter than with these other types of muscles, right? Than with the parallel or fusiform. But although they are shorter, you can generate a lot more power from these muscles than you can with the other ones that are longer, okay? So here you have your pinnate muscles. So they are short, fascicles, and they are attached by like obliquely, right, to the central tendon. Now, three forms of pennate muscles that you should know, right? So if you have a simple feather, that is called unipennate, right? So there's one side of a feather that is attached. Now, if you have more than one arrangement of this feather, you can call it, or two of them, you call it bipennate for two of them. And then you have this one that has a lot of feathers stuck together. So that's the multi-pennate type of muscle. I forgot I had the little squares here. So those you should be familiar with. Like if I put it, yeah.
Like muscle examples of these, or just a definition?
You should know the definition and what you look for in case you see the name. Like for example, if I put a picture of one of those and I say, which type of muscle is this? So you should look at the muscle and say, oh, this is, you know, fusiform. This is straight. You should be able to identify the type of muscle. Okay, and the muscles that that I have circled in red and emphasized, those are the ones that you should know. Okay. All right. So here, the muscles that have very long fibers, this is an important thing that is to know about the function of these muscles, right? The muscles that have very long fibers, for example here, parallel muscles, those can shorten a lot, but they do not give you a lot of power, okay? Now, the muscles that have short fibers, but a lot of them, they do not shorten too much, but they do give you a lot of power. Okay, so the power depends on the number of muscle fibers. Because remember that process of summation and recruitment. Remember those? Recruitment of fibers, right? The more fibers you recruit, the more power you add to the muscle. It also depends how many fibers you have available in the first place. All right. So here, interesting thing about origin and insertion of muscle. So that really depends on what kind of movement you are performing, okay? So this is very, very much relative, right? So let's just keep in mind for historical purposes, the origin is the part that doesn't move, and then the insertion is the part that moves. Okay, that's as simple as it gets. Here's the definition that we just mentioned about the prime movers, right? Then you have your antagonists that oppose the movement, and your synergists that are going to add force to the original movement. And then those fixators, those are going to direct or immobilize. As with the synergist, they're going to immobilize and direct more the type of contraction. All right, so here are the levers, right? Those are always interesting to look at because basically you have this structure that is based on physical properties, right? And the first one of those are it really looks like this seesaw type of arrangement, right? So basically you have these structures that moves around this fixed point. Now the fixed point is called the fulcrum. Okay, the part that doesn't move is the fulcrum. Okay, so now you can put force on one side, and depending on where the fulcrum is, you can expect some type of response on the other side. Okay, so that can change the direction or the speed or even the strength by which a muscle is working. So we have three examples of those. The general example is really this idea of the seesaw, and because something is happening here with the force, right? When you have this fulcrum like right in the middle, you have to apply equivalent forces at both ends for this thing to move, to pivot, right? Now, when you have somebody like me sitting over there, you have a lot more force going down this side than you have somebody, you know, skinny sitting on that side. So that was the frustrating part of this. I'm sure everybody had some kind of experience in physics like this, right? Hopefully not like mine. All right, so classes of these types of fulcrums, right? You have a first class, that is your typical seesaw type of thing. And then you have your second class that now your fixed point goes to the end or towards the end here of your wood, okay? So now what you do here is that you have the load in the middle and the fixed point at the end. So remember, for second class, the load has to be in the middle, and then you apply force to the other extremity, to the other side, okay? And then here you have your third class type of fulcrum lever thing, okay? So your fulcrum is, your fixed point is still over here, but now you have your load all the way to in the other side, and you're applying force to the middle here, okay? So the way that the force and distribution of movement are generated really depends on laws of physics, but we're not getting into that. Okay, so here's your example for your first class. And here is an example for a second class type of lever, right? So here you have, for example, this wheelbarrow type of thing. So you have the fixed point on this side, your load in the middle. I think those are cute monkeys. And you're applying the force on this side of the thing. Okay. And here we have, in the example, if you compare it with the body type of movement, a second class type of lever. So this point here is a fixed, the load goes in the middle, and then you're pulling here based on your muscles from this end over here. So the load in the middle, that is a second class type of lever. Everybody sees that? Yeah? Okay. Here is your third class, in which you have your load at the end. So here is your load, obviously, right? And then you have your fixed point that will be your elbow here, and you're putting a lot of force to the muscle in the middle to pull up that. Now, when you look at this picture here, it's not really obvious at first, right? Because you see here, the muscle is over here, but the fixed point is on the elbow, so the muscle attachment goes on this other side. It's a bit tricky to know what kind of class it is going on here. Okay, so you see you have your load over here. You have the force that is pulling the bone from a place that is before the fixed point, that is your elbow. Okay, so just remembering which one is first or second or third class, then you can look at a type of movement and figure out what kind of lever it is. Okay, so here a bit more of explanation with a bit more clear way on how this is moving, right? So here's your fixed point at the elbow, and here's your load that is moving at the end, and this is somewhere after the fixed point towards the load here that you're pulling on that bone. So here just a bit more of an explanation of how these muscles are working, and this is an interesting setup. And which type of lever is this? All right, let's take a vote. How many people think first? Okay, we got a couple of people. How many people think second? How many people are awake? Oh, good, we have one awake. All right, so let's look here. In this situation here, your fixed point is right there at the neck, right? So your head is going around the neck, right? So your muscle is pulling on this side. Your head here is fixed on the neck, that is a fixed point, and the rest of the head is moving, right? Going up and down. So this is what here? Fixed in the middle, and then you have things going on the both sides. That's your first, right? That's first lever. Okay. Then we look here with the feet, right? So now your fixed point is, let's say, at your toes, right? So let's say if you're trying to move to the tip toes, your fixed point are by your toes. Now, where is the load and where is the part that you are applying force here? The calf here, right? This muscle here in the calf, that's where you're applying the force. I mean, you can try to contract your bones, but it's not going to work, right? You have to contract your muscles, and those are right at the end here. So in the middle, this is your load right here. So your body goes to this load here, right? So here, what kind of lever is that? The second, right? And then in comparison here with the third class, we already saw that the third class, the muscle goes after the fixed point with the dumbbell kind of thing. Okay. All right, so here is your muscle gallery. What are the muscles that you have to know, right? It's only the simple ones. For example, temporalis. Guess where that muscle is? By your temporal bone. If you have no idea, can you guess that's by the temporal bone? It's right on the name, right? So that's easy. Okay. Now, orbicularis, oculi, that has to do with eyes, right? So this orbicularis, that's one of the circular muscles that you have by your eye. So that's the easy one, right? Everything is going to be easy and simple here. Orbicularis, oris, that has to do with your mouth, right? So you have two round muscles here. One in your eye, so it says oculi, and one in your mouth, that says oris. Right? Another one that is very interesting is this mentalis muscle. Now everybody should remember the mental part, right? That's your chin. So your mentalis is really here by your chin. The platysma, this one that goes down your neck here, right? And why I want you to know the platysma, because I think it's funny. You go like this, and then you can actually feel your platysma, some of you. Yeah, so there's like class exercise, feel your platysma. That would be a very odd picture. All right, so that's your platysma right there. What other muscle is emphasized here? Sternocleidomastoid muscle. We just talked about this guy. Okay? Trapezius. Looks like a trapezoid. We didn't look at the back muscles yet, but this one goes all the way around, and it's a very large muscle, and it does look like, yeah.
You know the origin, insertion, function, location, or just location?
You should know the location where the muscle is. Like if I give you a picture like this and I say, where is the trapezius muscle? You should be able to identify it. Okay, where is your orbicularis oculi muscle? That things like as simple and as practical as possible. More like second nature type of thing. Okay. All right. Here, zygomaticus, minor and major. These zygomaticus, right, muscles. Why do I want you to know them? Because if you contract them, you're going to look happy. So you should know your happy muscles. All right. This one is really cool too, but for the opposite reason, right? Corrugator supercilii. Cili is the eyelashes, right? So this one, corrugator supercilii, is going to be doing something to your eyebrows above the eyes, right? So what happens when you contract that muscle? You frown. Okay, so here you should know your happy muscles and your frowning muscles. All right, and hopefully we're going to use a lot more of those zygomaticus minor and major during the tests than you're going to use your corrugator supercilii, hopefully. All right, so these are the ones that you should associate the muscle with function, right? Here, the zygomaticus major, that gets you to smile. And then you have here orbicularis, that's the round one, but this is the oris because it's the mouth. You contract that muscle, you're going to make a little kissing motion, I guess. Right? Mentalis, that's your chin thing. Okay. Here is a guy, corrugator supercilii. You're going to look angry. Angry eyebrows with that guy. All right. Orbicularis oculi, that's going to make you blink. That's another one of your circular muscles, right? And this guy here with the platysma is a tense neck type of contraction. Another major muscle that you absolutely have to know is your diaphragm. So if you see a picture of that big muscle, you should definitely identify that as your diaphragm. Right? Some abdominal muscles. Pectoralis major, only a part of it is shown here, but it's right there. You should definitely know your pectoralis major. Rectus abdominis, that is what gives you the six-pack if you exercise them a lot, like a lot of abs. So that's your rectus, straight fibers, right? Rectus abdominis. Serratus anterior, the form serratus looks like a saw with teeth, right? Serratus. Have you seen that in the lab? Yeah, it's not something new, right? Cool. So serratus, you should definitely know. If you find muscles that look like they're like teeth, like that, usually go into the vertebra, right? Those are your serratus. Here, transversus abdominis. So those are transverse fibers in comparison to your rectus fibers. So those are at 90 degrees of the rectus abdominis. Oblique muscles, so those are angles, right? It's not transverse, it's not 90 degrees, so it is oblique. So you have internal and you have external oblique muscles. So I think those are all the muscles that I expect you to know for this area. Then there are more questions. What is the most important muscle for inspiratory breathing? Or breathing in general? Just mention it, that is your diaphragm. So here is another view of your muscles to your abdominal wall, right? So here you have a transversus and oblique. The rectus is very easy. Rectus abdominis is very easy to find. And the oblique, so compare here the oblique and the transversus. Know which ones they are. This very important. Why do I have this picture here? Because muscles of the pelvic floor, right? They're very interesting. Now, they're basically the same type of muscles as we have with males and females, right? And there is a major difference between males and females. I hope everybody knows that, right? Females have 3 holes, males have 2 holes. The names of the muscles are about the same, and the huge difference here, of course, is that the 3rd hole that the females have, of course, is a vaginal opening, right? So what muscles should you know out of this? External urethral sphincter, right? So that's a circular muscle. Remember I mentioned these sphincters are circular, right? So those are about the same muscles. When you go to pee, men or women activate the same muscles, right? This is one of them. Deep transverse perineal muscles. So those are related to an area around the anus, that's the perineal area. So those are the same for men and women. External anal sphincter. That should be an easy one to know too. If that muscle doesn't work well, we're in trouble. All right. So that is a muscle very much used for prevent things from going out when you don't want them, and actually allowing things to go out when you need them to. Hopefully everybody has those working properly. All right. Oh yes, of course you also have to know that females have 3 holes and not 2. You'll be amazed how many people don't know that. All right. So other muscles that you should know. We have mentioned this one before, sternocleidomastoid muscle and deltoid muscle. That's the one at your shoulder, right? Looks like the delta. Greek. Pectoralis major, that's the big muscle over here, convergent muscle. Biceps, everybody knows that one. Pectoralis minor, just behind your pectoralis major. Serratus, that's the one that goes to your ribs. That's it. Now, on your back, what are the muscles that you have to know? Trapezius, very important, big muscle. Here you're seeing only half of it, the other half is on this side. Okay, so the trapezius, it's like a diamond or a trapezoid. And you have here your levator scapula, and that has to do something with connected to the scapula, right? And the head, so that's the back of the neck. Deltoid, we just mentioned that. Okay, that's it for the back. For the leg, which ones you have to know? The most obvious one, that is your butt muscle, right? Gluteus maximus. You have to know that muscle. I mean, it's very beautiful muscle. Big, too. Okay? That's it. Now, for the front leg, you should know this guy here. Quadriceps femoris is made up of three or four actually different muscles, but you see the shape of this muscle that is pennate shape, right? And this is actually the most powerful muscle that we have in the body. Okay, so know your quadriceps femoris, and you can always know here femoris has to do with the femur, so there's no way of missing this one. All right, so I just gave you the answer. The what muscle is the most powerful muscle in the body? Just mentioned that. That's the quadriceps femoris. That's the most powerful muscle. Okay. So now we leave the muscle and we go into the central nervous system, right? So we'll make this as simple as we possibly can. Organization of the central nervous system. Right? So basically we know that before we jump into 11, do we have any questions on yes? Largest, I don't think so. I think that trapezius might be largest, but I don't know for sure. Don't quote me on that. Okay? But it's a massive muscle too. Yeah. Okay. Do we have any more questions on the muscles part? Are we good? Shall we start using the brains? All right, so here, basically for the nervous system, it's going to sense information, and what is most important is going to respond to what it took in, right? It's going to make decisions and respond. So this is all about communication. First, you have to see what is it that is the information that you're asking, and then to decide how the nervous system is going to respond. Now, here, basically, we're going to see at cells of the central nervous system and of nervous system in general, central and peripheral. So we're going to look at some neuroglia, or just glia, and neurons. So those are the main cells. And then this part of electrical signals, we already covered, right? All the part when we went through the action potential and which channels open, which channels close, which one is voltage sensitive or voltage gated or ligand gated, that should be very fresh and very clear to everyone, right? So that is very important, of course, because it's part of the central nervous system work. Yeah. Just in case if you need more exercise, more practice, or if you have any questions, ask. But yeah, that is part also. That's fair game, right? Action potential is fair game for test number 5. You should know that. Okay. Let me see here. So yeah, action potential, and this part here that we looked at somewhat, we looked at it before, but we're going to go into more details about the structure of the neuron and also of some glia and what is happening at the synapse and how is it that neurotransmitters get to the synapse, and general function and structure of neurons. Okay. So basically, your central nervous system is going to get the information, integrate it, process it, and then respond to that information accordingly. So three basic functions of your CNS, or your central, or NS, I would say nervous system in general. So it's gathering information, processing it, and then doing some output with it. Now, your nervous system is divided into two major parts. You have your central nervous system and you have your peripheral nervous system, right? So your central nervous system, that's the easy one. Brain and spinal cord, that is it. Peripheral nervous system is everything else outside of the brain and the spinal cord. So here's just a nice illustration of a nervous system function, right? So let's say you're thirsty, you see a glass of water, that's your input information, and your brain is thinking, get that water and drink it. So that's the processing of the information. Output is you're going to contract those muscles to drink that glass of water. Very, very obvious. Okay. So again, here are the divisions for your central nervous system, okay, brain and spinal cord. And then your peripheral nervous system, that has to do with everything outside of the CNS, right? Now with the peripheral nervous system, you're going to have spinal nerves, and those are going to they're going to come and go to the spinal cord, and they also have cranial nerves that goes straight from the brain. Okay? So you have different types of nerves that come from the CNS that go to the peripheral nervous system. Okay. So here's just a picture of what the central and peripheral will look like in general. Okay, so those terms that always will drive anyone insane, right? Let's see what are the terms you need to know here. Sensory division of peripheral nervous system, okay? So sensory division, those are called afferent. Sensory is afferent. So now, just to make us confused, you have afferent and you have efferent type of nerves. So the afferent ones, they are going to come from your sensory signals to the central nervous system, okay? And then efferent one is going to go from the central nervous system to wherever they have to go to, okay, to the periphery. Now, your efferent division, motor efferent division, is subdivided into other classes. So here you have your somatic nervous system, that is what you can control, and you have your autonomic nervous system, that is automatic. You don't control it. Okay, so here you go, more explanation on your somatic nervous system. So these are going to send impulses from the central nervous system to skeletal muscles. Those are the ones you control, right? So this is your voluntary nervous system, in which you had also briefly mentioned before. Now your autonomic nervous system, that it gets more complicated, right? So this have to do with nerves that are coming from the CNS and going to target areas, right? And those are going to regulate smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, and also glands, okay? So this is all part of involuntary. You don't control those nerves, okay? And on top of that, these non-controlled nerves or neurons here, they are subdivided into very major classes. One of them is sympathetic and the other one is parasympathetic, and they'll balance each other's actions. Okay, so sympathetic is mainly your fight or flight type of nervous of response, and then your parasympathetic is more related to rest and digest type of nervous function. So sympathetic and parasympathetic work opposite to each other. Okay. So here is this organization, this overview organization of the nervous system, right? So you start here, your CNS, remember, brain and spinal cord, that's it. And then you go here to your peripheral nervous system, right? So now you're going to have those nerves, they're going to come either from the brain or from the spinal cord, right? Coming from the CNS. And those are going to communicate the signals from the CNS to the rest of the body. Okay. So here, going down the level of communication, you're going to find your motor division, right? So this is the efferent division. And then you're going to also have this division into autonomic or somatic. Which one is the one you can control? Somatic. Everybody got that? Is everybody awake? Which one is the one you can control? Somatic. Don't get that wrong on the test, right? Somatic, you control that. All right. And then your autonomic, you don't control those. Remember, your autonomic is going to be subdivided into other classes. You got to know. Sympathetic, parasympathetic. Okay. And here, coming from the periphery, those are your sensory division. All right. So looking at the structure of the neuron, we have seen a neuron before, so we're just going to look at it in more details, right? So in comparison to all the other cells of the body, neurons are very, very big, right? Some of them are 3 feet or more, depending on how tall you are, right? Because of those axons, they can extend like long distance, right? Like from your spinal cord all the way to your toe, that can be an axon, right? So what are the important parts to know here? Dendrites. Dendrites are close to the body, usually, right? In case of this neuron it is, right? This is the most popular type of neuron, right? So dendrites are going to gather information, okay? Now, in the body of the neuron, you're going to find a lot of mitochondria and also a lot of ribosomes, because a lot of your neurotransmitters are going to be produced here. So a lot of the activity of the cell that uses up energy has to be close to the area of all this neurotransmitter production. So this is why you're going to find ribosomes and a lot of mitochondria in the body, okay, in the body of the neuron. So here, let's make sure we got this here, right? Mitochondria and ribosomes. Okay, so clusters of ribosomes, those are called Nissl bodies. Okay, so this is where you have a concentration of neurotransmitters being produced. So a lot of ribosomes together in the body, those you call Nissl bodies right there. Okay. Now, interesting thing to remember about neurons, they don't divide, right? Since they don't divide, you're not going to find centrioles in the body. What are the centrioles used for? Mitosis, cell division, right? Centrioles are important for cell division. These guys don't divide, so what's the use of centrioles if they're going to be there? They're not going to be there, okay? So neurons, basically, what they are excitable cells. They're going to transmit electrical signals, and those are going to be converted into chemical signals, right? Most of the time you have chemical signals going on, not just electrical signals. So we looked at the dendrites, right? Dendrites are here gathering information. And then you have your cell body, right? And here in this part, that is the connection of the cell body to the axon, you're going to have your axon hillock. We've seen that before. What do you generate at that point, at that part in the neuron? Action potentials. That is something you should remember, right? So action potentials are generated in the axon hillock. Okay. Then you have here axolemma, axoplasm. This is just the axon. Okay, the axon that goes to send the information down to the teledendrites that are the end of the axon, and that is going to go to the synaptic terminals. They're going to connect with whatever target it's going to communicate with. So this is just a review, right? So now, taking a better look at the synapse, okay? So this is the site of communication between neurons, but not only between neurons, because we know we have different types of synapse, but between the neuron and whatever it's going to talk to. That's your synapse. And we have seen before the neuromuscular junction. That is a type of synapse, right? Okay, so neuromuscular junction is a type of synapse. Draw with this thing. Okay, so let's look at what is important here. This here, of course, is your presynaptic axon, and the part that is close to the synapse is called telodendrion. Okay, so presynaptic cell, telodendrion here. So this thing just before the synapse is called the synaptic bulb. Okay, and of course inside of this bulb you're going to find a lot of your little vesicles that are packed with neurotransmitters. Which one is a neurotransmitter we looked before that is exclusive for neuromuscular junction? Acetylcholine. Everybody remembers acetylcholine? Do you remember how to make acetylcholine? Yeah? How do you make it? Oh, that you're telling me how to put it into the vesicles? As the transport, yeah, you got the last part of it, right? How do you make acetylcholine? It's an enzyme in the cytoplasm, and you have two substrates, acetyl-CoA and choline, right? Acetyl-CoA and choline. The enzymes put it together, make acetylcholine, and then how do you put it inside the vesicle? That's the problem, right? How you put it? First, you have to use active transport of protons to make a gradient, right? So that's a proton pump that uses ATP. And then you have that antiport. Remember that antiport? One proton out, one acetylcholine in. That's your antiport, how to fill up those vesicles. So this is just a review of what that thing was, okay? Now, this is showing mitochondria like right there, but usually the mitochondria are present at the body, okay? Because that's where you usually are using a lot of the energy to make all of this neurotransmitter. Okay. And then how do the vesicles get to the ends? We're going to see that. Okay. This is how, by axoplasmic transport. So these vesicles really, they start being formed all the way up here in the body. And then when they are packed with acetylcholine, they're going to be transported all the way to the end of that axon. And you call that axoplasmic transport because it's in the axon and it's in the cytoplasm that is inside of the axon. Okay, and it's going to bring it all the way down to the synaptic cleft or to the presynaptic membrane. Okay. Yes. Oh no, it's not diffusion at all. It is energy using molecules that are going to hold on to the vesicle and then use either thin filaments or thick filaments of microtubules to really walk on those microtubules carrying that big vesicle. Okay, so it is active transport, but it's a different type of active transport. It's not like membrane active transport. It's just transport that uses energy, uses ATP to move that molecule down the axon length. Okay, and actually we have two types of that type of movement. Okay, so it's not diffusion, definitely not. So types of synapses. What we had seen before is this guy over here. or neuromuscular junction, right? So other types that we have is when a neuron wants to communicate with another neuron, okay? So this is just a neuronal junction. Name is not there? It's not there. So you can name this neuronal junction, okay? And then another type is a neuroglandular junction, in which your neuron, the axon here, is going to connect with glands and tell the glands what to do. Okay? So now, types of cells that you're going to find in your central nervous system, right? So, of course, we look at the neuron, that's the number one. You're also going to find neuroglia, and they're also well known just as glia or glial cells, okay? Here, glial cells. Those are little cells. They are going to be around, you're going to be surrounding the neurons, which are bigger cells. So here you see a big neuron, and then you're going to find glia like between those neurons. Okay, they have several types of glia, and they have several types of functions too. So mentioning just a few of them here. First one is this astrocyte. Okay, so this is really the most abundant, the most the one in bigger numbers that you have. Now they look like little stars. Okay, so they have a lot of these branches. Okay, so this is how these cells look like. So they are going to get stuck to neurons, okay, close to the synaptic endings, and also they are going to be surrounding capillaries. You see this here? This is a blood vessel. Okay, this is a capillary vessel. So these astrocytes, they are also going to take part in the blood-brain barrier function. Okay, so they are going to be surrounding here the neurons, and they are going to be surrounding those blood vessels. Okay, so they're going to support the neurons, and here they play a very important role in exchange between what's in the capillaries to what goes to the neurons. What do you find in the capillaries? Blood, exactly. You're going to find blood, okay? And other stuff that most of it is not allowed to get into the CNS, thank goodness. But sometimes that's not a good thing. Sometimes you want things to get to CNS, like for example, certain therapeutic drugs, and they don't get there. So that's a problem of a blood-brain barrier and delivery, right? So other function of these astrocytes is also to guide the migration of neurons that are developing, right? And of course, control the chemical environment. And they also control response to impulses and neurotransmitters. Okay. All right, so there happens to be, very, very important brain cells. But they do have specific areas in the brain that they are located. It's not just like everywhere. Okay, so keep that in mind. So now looking at these microglial cells. Okay? So those are different than those astrocytes. Okay, so those are smaller, and they kind of look like an egg. Okay, ovoid shape is like an egg shape. And they have these things that look like thorny processes that are coming out of the cell body. Okay, so basically they monitor neuron, but one important aspect of microglial cells is that they go towards neurons that are damaged, and they try to help the environment and help the situation there with that damaged neuron. Okay, they are also part of the immune system of the brain. Okay, because we know that the white blood cells that is part of your peripheral immune system, they don't get into the CNS, right? So your big macrophages and those white blood cells, they do not go through the blood-brain barrier, so they stay in the periphery area. Now, in your brain, these microglial cells, are the cells that take up the function of the immune system. So when they see something wrong, they are capable of phagocytosis. Okay? So let's say some certain bacteria got to the brain. Like, can anybody give me an example of a bacteria that can get to the brain? Something that causes meningitis. Meningococcal bacteria would be an example, right? What is going on here? Okay, now let's talk about brain function. Oh, come on, do not die on me. All right, so these microglial cells are really taking up the function of immune system in the brain. Okay, everybody clear with that? Very, very important cells. Now, these other guys here are quite interesting. Ependymal cells, right? So they can look like they are columnar, and they can look like they are squamous or square, right? So they have different form, but the most important aspect is that they are ciliated. Okay, they have the cilia. Well, if they have cilia, you can imagine they are in contact with some form of a fluid, right? With a fluid-filled cavity, okay? So this cilia on these cells make the cerebrospinal fluid move around, okay? CFS is for cerebrospinal fluid. So you're going to find these cells in central cavities that are in the brain and spinal column. Okay, so when you have these cells are going to be working as an interface between the fluid and the central nervous system, that is your brain and spinal cord. Okay, so those are your ependymal cells. Then you have these ones that I think they're really, really cool. Oligodendrocytes. The name is telling you, oligo, a lot of, dendro for dendrites, sites for cells. So cells that have a lot of dendrites, they have a lot of branches, okay? Now, they wrap, look at this, they wrap nerve fibers, forming something that looks like myelin sheets, okay? But this is not the same type of myelin sheet that you find in your motor neuron. It's different. Okay, remember for the motor neuron, you had the Schwann cells that do the myelinating, right? Now these guys in the CNS, they're different. These oligodendrocytes do that myelinating type of thing. Now, you don't have only one cell per myelinating body, okay? In this case, you have one cell that they're going to myelinate several nerve fibers. So look at this. Look how cool this is. You have here the cell body, right, of this oligodendrocyte, and then you have these branches that reach a lot of these nerve fibers, and then each one of these branches is going to wrap around and make that myelin sheet. And this can go like up to, I think, about 60 or so of those little sheets that come from these branches. Okay, so one cell is going to stretch a branch and myelinate, stretch a little arm here, myelinate, like a lot of these nerve fibers. Okay, so this, remember this name of this guy, oligodendrocyte. And you also have satellite cells. Okay, those usually are going to be associated with cell bodies of neurons, as you have them here. Okay. And the function of the satellite cell is similar to the astrocytes. Okay. Now, let's see here. And here you have the other cells, the Schwann cells that we just talked about, right? So they're also called neurolemocytes, but I don't really care about those names. If you remember Schwann cells, I'm happy, okay? So those are going to be surrounding and helping to make the myelin sheet. But now the difference is that the Schwann cell, this is like one cell here that wraps around. Okay, so it's not like the oligo guy. This is one cell that wraps around. Okay. So what else is important here? So of course, Schwann cells have similar functions as your oligodendrocytes. Okay. And these Schwann cells are very, very important for regeneration of fibers, peripheral nerve fibers. Okay. Now we're not talking about a whole neuron that dies and gets regenerated. That doesn't really happen. But if you have damage to, let's say, for example, an axon here, and this rest of the neuron is intact, sometimes the rest of the cell can repair itself, and that repairing is very much helped by Schwann cells. Okay. And that we can have, for example, a situation in which, let's say if somebody had surgery on a finger, and then for a lot of time you don't feel anything on that finger because of course some nerve fibers are damaged, but then after I don't know, months or years, you start feeling again. So that is fixing or repair of the damaged fibers. And then you think about the Schwann cells having a big impact on that process. Yes, yes. But now also there is a lot that we don't know or is very, very complicated about repairing of nerve or neurons in the brain. But we do know that neuroplasticity happens throughout life. Okay, so of course, if you have a developing brain, that's a lot easier to repair damage. But even after a person is, an adult after 25 years old or so, you still have a high level of neuroplasticity that can reshape and fix things. Right. So classification of those neurons. Now that's interesting. Because one, it's not even in the book, I didn't see when I glanced at the book, is this one here called anaxonic neuron. Okay, anaxonic is telling you it doesn't have an axon. Now you look at this neuron, it has a cell body, right? And it has dendrites everywhere. Now dendrites are important for receiving information, right? So these guys are receiving a lot of information, and what are they doing with the information? I have no idea. They are keeping them all for themselves. I don't know. This is kind of a question mark of how these neurons are working in the brain. You find these types of neurons in the brain, okay? So it seems like they gather information, and how they are passing it along, I don't know. That's your anaxonic, enigmatic neuron. Then you have this guy here that is a bipolar neuron. It doesn't mean that it becomes really euphoric and then depressive. That's not what the bipolar means in this sense, okay? What happens here is that you have this cell body right in the middle of the neuron. And then you have here dendrites that are receiving information all to one side. Then you have this long process, so things that stick out of bodies of neurons, those are called processes, right? So you have, okay, so you have your dendrites, so you have a little time. Dendritic process, so this is gathering information, bringing to the body, and then you have your axon on the other side here. So bipolar means dendrites to one side and axon to the other side. All right, so this is your bipolar guy. Now you have your synaptic terminus after your axon. All right. And then you have this guy here that is a unipolar neuron that looks very much like your bipolar guy, but it's not bipolar. What is happening here? You have here dendrites, okay, but this here is an axon. You see, out of this body that is to the side, you have two axons coming along. Okay, So here you have axon going this way, axon going that way. Comparison, here you have a dendritic process, and here you have the axon on the other side. And of course, this body is to the side, okay? So this is your unipolar neuron. Okay, now these neurons are mainly found with sensory nerves, so they're more specialized. Okay, so your unipolar neuron associated with sensory organs and sensory nerves. And then you have your most common type of neuron that we have seen so far. It is your multipolar neuron. So that's the guy with the body over here, full of hair, I mean dendrites, right? You think about a lot of hair, that's the dendrite receiving information. Then you have your axon, single one, that goes to the synaptic point at the other side. Okay, so let me see here. So this is just a description of the types of neurons. Okay. So here a better cartoon of your unipolar neuron, and you see what's happening here. You have dendrite that gets information, but here you have the other axon, right? So here is also axon. Okay. So here you have information, they're coming from this side and being transferred to that side over there.